Hello. I'm getting started a little bit later. Next week, I'm able to start on time a little more. As if I'm not the one setting these times for myself, a schedule. Anyway, it's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name is Aubri Devashrayee. Today, I wanted to go further into our discussion about the need for a general strike and how we can accomplish this, because we desperately need it. General strike meaning in the US, but also just in the world, across people, time, and space. We need to organize and take back our power, because the fascist aggression that is happening right now will not stop unless we make it stop, because they seem to have no sort of inclination in wanting to show any sort of restraint or value of human life. So it's up to us to halt the economy and make it so that our material conditions can improve with demands that we have met by withholding our labor. Okay. And then moving on, I wanted to go over a training that my friend who works for AIDS United created, and it is really excellent. It is for Black and Indigenous people of color who are queer, especially people who are trans or gender nonconforming. So this is meant to educate healthcare professionals on the specific needs that this kind of intersectionality requires. But I wanted to go through it as a sort of teaching method because I think it is excellent, just incredible at explaining these concepts that seem to be difficult for some people to wrap their heads around. It's very educational and just sensitive to all of these various needs. So I want to go through that together. There are 3 courses in it. There's course 1, 2, and 3. So we'll see how far we're able to get. We may just be able to do course 1, but you get to see the work of my friend Gabriel. Incredible human being, doing incredible work. We love to see it. Okay. And then after that, get into banned book club. We're reading The Giver. And for this section, we read chapters 12 and 13. They're a little bit longer, so we just had 2 chapters for this section. And there are some exciting developments that I'd like to discuss. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. This book smells like a book fair. And I love that. Do you remember the book fair? Do they still have book fairs? Are there book fairs happening? Oh, it smells so good. It's intoxicating. Anyway, me being distracted. I want to go over banned book club. And then also get into Wuthering Heights. The Streamly reading. Yeah? But first, since I like to start off with a humorous video, I wanted to show this compilation from the show that was previously running, known as Legendary, and they canceled it because, as the title of this video says, HBO is homophobic. I happen to agree. Queerphobic. Because of the whole heated rivalry stuff, people have forgotten how many queer shows and programming that they've canceled, so I haven't forgotten, bitch. Anyway, I wanted to show this. We'll see what this is like with all the copyright shit. So I'll be pausing it intermittently to provide commentary, a chuckle here or there. But this is to make it so I don't have the copyright gods breathing down my neck.
Because they need to be cheered up.
Are y'all still talking about that? Shut the fuck up.
It's got some flashbacks. This is from the show Pose that she was in, and was super amazing in this show. She did an incredible job in Pose. Okay, I do have to say, I don't love when straitjackets are used to show like artistry. I mean, the irony is not lost on me that like many queer people, especially trans people, historically in time have been committed to mental institutions for saying that we have a mental illness because we're queer. This isn't to say that we don't have mental illnesses, because I certainly do. But being queer is not a mental illness, despite all of the fascist propaganda to the contrary, saying the contrary. And so that's not lost on me, but I think we should move away from using straitjackets in like a whimsical way. I don't know. Unless you... I don't know. I feel like it's... if it's like a way to spread awareness, perhaps, but I don't think that's what's happening. Okay, that's my take.
For me, it was regular. For
That wig
the
is
regular
so cool.
people, y'all.
She is essentially channeling her character from Pose, Electra, and just reading everybody.
It's fucking phenomenal. There we go. I want to hear that beat.
What?
Can I hear that beat? Can I hear that beat? Let me hear you roll.
They're all uncomfortable. She gets up as a guest judge and goes on stage to like take the moment and show them what is happening, to show them up, and everyone is so uncomfortable. I didn't get to watch I didn't get to watch Legendary when it was on HBO while it was actually running because I did not have HBO. So, classist and queerphobic.
Like I understand, but I'm not so sure I do.
You guys are such a stunning house. You know what I mean? Like,
Bitch, is you blind?
the physicality
They're not
and
that stunning.
the faces are. Whoa. Let's make sure.
Here we go! Here the fuck we go! Here the fuck we go!
I am that stunning. I am. Bam, 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 bam,
Props to
bam,
your
bam,
mama.
bam. I am ballroom.
But here, this house, she's a guest.
They're like, okay, it's time to sit down.
Sit back down.
I'm sorry.
I levitated.
That Beyonce quote, that little insertion. I'm levitating. Damn. Just insane talent. Even Deshaun glitched for a sec. He's the MC.
Gag business. That was a battle.
Give me that bottle.
I didn't get a chance to even like start to miss this show because I wasn't around, or I wasn't around. I wasn't watching it when it was running. Ooh, I like this frame. And I didn't even get a chance to miss it. That's so rude. I really wish it was back on the air. So now we have to watch these compilations in lieu of that. But the talent really was out of this world. And there are people who are from the working class who are this talented that need more opportunities.
The choreography wasn't as strong as you guys' outfits and as the presentation was. Jazzle. I mean,
Oh, it looked like Meg Thee Stallion was guest judging this.
Not boo me, not me.
Oh, the Osborne girl.
You look like an avatar.
He does. You look like an avatar. Like it's like something from like
Not even this world, but
If you kick every Latino out of this country,
Swear she always says the wrong stuff. Yeah, she does. Oh, this quote. When she's on The View. Oh, this is horrible.
and who is going to be cleaning your toilet, Donald Trump?
oh, that's no.
In the sense that, you know what I mean?
So let me be really honest, right?
That it didn't even get through to her that there were people around her being like, no, that you shouldn't say that. She's just like, what do you mean?
I'm still fucking bored.
These looks are incredible. That cute little bowl cut. Bow cut.
It's fashion? Is it wait, what is
This.
it fashion?
Yes, it's fashion, but the category is bizarre. Bizarre comes from ballroom.
How many people are scared?
The reason why there's so much magic around the world. Whether it's fashion, whether it's the
She stands up. Just. She is passionate. I mean, so much of culture really does come from the ballroom scene from New York City, where it originated in Harlem. We have to be very clear about that. The little snippet of America's Next Top Model coming in. Tyra being, who, raise your hand if you're scared. Me too. She says me too, as if she's not the host of the show and like a producer.
I am one of the highest paid, most successful stylists in the world, and I was inspired,
That hair.
Let me finish.
Amazing.
Mamita. Let me piece of paper.
Let's go. I wanna pump the runway, walk, walk. I wanna pump the runway, yes. I wanna pump the runway, walk, walk.
This. Yeah, that was so cunty. So fucking cunty. Because that one was trying to throw the cape over her and be like, oh, I'm stealing your shine. And then she's like, watch this. Snap. Snapping the cape. Amazing.
Miss Michaela, get over here.
Yep, the yoink.
Let them quit.
Don't fuck with me.
They might as well pack their bags by now. W-E-S-C.
Stunning. Oh no, I forgot about that. This editing is so unhinged. It's like a helicopter. And then the wig coming off, just really the cherry on top. Or not on top, for that matter. You don't want to be on top. Chop.
So Lord, the ninjas bring it.
No. If you're gonna introduce the 360.
That long ass pause. The drama for no. Ugh, I fucking love queer people. This is how culture is made. So iconic. So fierce. The one-liners that they got from this show. The amount of talent. I'm mad.
Which is my signature dip to the world. You need to land it. That's all.
That's all.
But I definitely landed that 360.
That's all.
Let me ask the audience.
Erica, like you always put it together real well.
I've won more than the rest.
Not this trip. That's why your chain's on the floor.
They all go, ooh. True.
Stand next to your house and have good sportsmanship, because that's what ballroom is about.
The queen is back. Bow down.
I'm not gonna walk off this stage and I say how I fucking feel tonight. Because this house does not deserve to go home tonight. This house didn't do shit tonight. And y'all gave them a perfect fucking score.
Yeah.
You okay? What we...
I love this look. I'd wear the fuck out of this, I have to say. But, Jamila, what's going on with the eyelashes? Everything's just like heavy on her.
Live for you?
Let's see if it
But
cuts to
we're not
her
living
again.
for you. You got an attitude. At the end of the day, he bulked rings around her. Period.
No, it didn't show her again. We'll see if they show another clip.
I'm so tired, child. I'm so tired. I'm really tired.
Deshaun, we created a word and it's called no-gain.
No gain. No gain. This is why you need to leave the wordplay to the queer people. There's no comparison.
Me? It gave very... I just learned this choreography today, and I don't know what voguing is, so it came off very no-gain. I was gagging.
That was terrible.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way. That clip of Ms. Cracker is so shady, but also warranted.
If we got a bone to battle, I'm over it. Go down.
Bitch, give me, let's go.
The bones cracking sound.
No, ma'am. I was just ordering Postmates. Sorry, I was bored.
That is so shady.
I need them to feel good, y'all, because I don't want...
This isn't a charity. This is a $100,000 competition.
Austin Powers outfit.
Yeah. I'm not going to question a 10, but if it's because they need to be cheered up,
Are y'all still talking about that? Shut the fuck up.
Her twerking.
Performance was a little slow. I got a little lost.
Law loves a bowl cut on this show. This was the bowl cut era for her.
In the middle, but...
Oh, the crowd is talking, Law.
And the audience don't know shit.
The Beetlejuice look.
I agree 100% with Jamila.
It's so weird for people to agree with Jamila.
This ain't the battle show. This is legendary. It's about group performance.
I want to disagree with Compton Barbie at the end. That's all. Because we redeem ourselves every single time.
Calling her Compton Barbie.
It's a great conversation.
She looks
wrong scenario.
amazing. Holy shit.
That's not fair to the competition.
I don't get that.
Law, you're just so tired. And in the words of my late great hit, keep it moving.
You ate that.
Just being like, I can appreciate a really good read. I can appreciate it. I loved those glasses that Law was wearing. Offensive Tea. They do have some really great compilations, I have to say. Okay, so getting into the general strike, let's talk about why we need a general strike. I mean, the obvious being the US having illegal, immoral, unwarranted aggression against the world. This imperialist violence has to come to an end. We already know that the American empire is falling, but in order to make it so that we are protecting as many people as possible, that people are not being hurt, because that is what's happening. We are just being mowed down. Mowed down? Oh boy. We're being mowed down by the billionaire class. And we have to stop them. Because they are funding this war machine. They are funding all of the fascist violence that is happening against marginalized people with these concentration camps, with AI data centers, with taking our wages and salaries and jobs. It goes on and on and on. So we need a national strike. So please look up General Strike US. And if you won't, I'll send you the link in this chat. Oh, whoops. Maybe not. I didn't actually copy it. There we go. Okay. Da 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 da. It's in the chat. Sign a strike card, submit your demands. We need to take our power back. We're running out of time. They're destroying the planet and our chances of actually living in a sustainable world. Okay, so on that cheery note, this is a video from More Perfect Union, and let's see, when did it come out? 10 months ago. So this was before the strike that happened in solidarity with Minneapolis.
If every worker in America refused to show up tomorrow, no trains, flights, Amazon deliveries, no teachers or nurses, the country would grind to a halt. And that's the power of a general strike. So a general strike is a work stoppage where workers from multiple industries simultaneously cease work, not just over specific workplace issues, but to demand broad social, political, or economic change. It's the ultimate tool of collective action, where workers across a society in every sector halt work to achieve solidarity-driven, large-scale transformation. Historically, general strikes have been one of the most effective means for labor movements to force systematic change. So why don't we see them in the US anymore? Because they were outlawed. In the past, when American workers tried, the government panicked. In 1919, 65,000 workers in Seattle shut down the city. No police, no bosses, just workers running things on their terms. And what happened? They were called un-American, Bolsheviks, and dangerous radicals. And the government sent in the National Guard, armed troops. Then in 1934, general strikes in Minneapolis and San Francisco paralyzed entire cities and won massive victories. The ruling class took note and gave workers the right to unionize in 1935. But in 1947, Congress struck back with the Taft-Hartley Act, making it illegal for unions to coordinate general strikes. Their goal? Make sure we never see another Seattle or Minneapolis again. But just because the US banned them doesn't mean that workers elsewhere stopped. In 2023, when France tried to raise the retirement age, millions of workers shut down transportation, energy, and public services, forcing the government to backtrack. So what's stopping workers here? The law is written to keep us divided, but workers are fighting back. Some of the biggest unions in the US are playing the long game, lining up their contracts to expire on May 1st, 2028. International Workers' Day, which would set them up to walk out on strike at the same time. Unions
International
already
Workers' Day.
and more have the opportunity to join this year. This is huge.
In 2028.
Coordinating contract.
So we need to have action before this, a general strike, in order to stop what is happening, because I fear very greatly for the future of the United States of America and the people in it, and the people of the world for that matter, because the US empire is being run by egomaniacal, violent fascists who are not going to stop until they have achieved world domination. We have to end this. But it is cool that we have unions playing the long game. We need to engage in this kind of planning and organization in order to create the world that we want to see. This is what people on the right have done for years and years, of having this limitless imagination for cruelty and enriching themselves. We need to have the same thing, but on the side of morality and humanizing people and giving people dignity and living wages and better material conditions that they can live in. That is something to fight for. Anyway.
Expirations is a direct challenge to the system that keeps workers from striking together. I know a general strike sounds impossible in the US. That's by design. But history shows that when workers stand together, we win. Whether or not 2028 leads to a full general strike, the fact that workers are even trying, this is a massive shift in a collective mentality. If you're in a union, or even just thinking about organizing your workplace, pay attention. Because May Day 2028 might be the day US workers remind the world what solidarity really means. What would happen if every worker in America refused to...
Okay. So this is them covering the first U.S. general strike in 80 years. I wanted to show this follow-up.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain, to earn your pay, who for
Really cool to see.
past for no more than your bread, have bled for your countries and counted your dead.
Everyday people standing up, taking to the streets and offering their voices to the resistance. Really cool. Okay, so continuing on. We also need a world strike, which is why I have a world strike form that you can fill out in the Twitch profile or on YouTube. I have links to this in the profiles. The General Strike US, the link that I put in the chat, they have some really great trainings on their website and on YouTube. I wanted to watch this. I think the other training that they had was great. It is a PowerPoint, so not as much necessarily like visibly engaging in this ever-present world of constant stimulation that we've become accustomed to, but I still want to talk about the importance of the content. So, this is Morality, Power, and the Right to Resist. I'm also going to be working on a bracelet while I play this.
To resist, and why collective refusal, including a general strike, becomes necessary. This presentation is important because it helps people see systems as they actually operate and not how they're described in law, media, or ideology. It connects domestic and global struggles, showing how oppression, exploitation, and violence are linked across places like Turtle Island, Minneapolis, Venezuela, Congo, Sudan, and Palestine, and beyond. By understanding morality, power, and resistance
Cool
through a
that they
materialist
mentioned
lens,
Sudan
participants
and the
can
Congo.
see why collective refusal, including a
Our
revolutionary general
liberty
strike, isn't
is
just symbolic or strategic,
interwoven.
but a
I
moral
was about to say
response to
interconnected,
systems that
and then
harm life.
connected, and then
It
interwoven.
equips communities to act in
Anyway.
ways that protect each other, reclaim legitimacy, and build alternatives to oppressive structures. We understand power to be the ability to define phenomena and make them act in a desired manner, in the manner that best serves the people. With that said, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. Before we get started, let's root ourselves in what this is. This is not a moral philosophy lecture. This is about morality, functions inside of the system. Before we dive in, let's quickly define materialism. In general, materialism is the view that reality, including society, history, and human behavior, is shaped by material conditions like work, resources, and social relationships, rather than abstract ideas or ideals alone. Materialism asks what is actually happening and to whom. This matters for our organizing because people are constantly being told it's illegal. That's just how the system works, and there's no alternative. So, without further ado, I'll pass it over to the next facilitator. All right, so tonight we'll be exploring how morality is shaped by material conditions, how power defines justice and criminality, how language is used to justify harm, and why resistance emerges when legitimacy collapses. So, this is not about beliefs or ideals, it is about outcomes. Once again, like who lives, who suffers, and who benefits. We can go to the next slide. And we see Debbie's hand up for
Talking
participation.
about these sort of power dynamics and the concept of free will, how people and their options for morality acting in an ethical manner, what the mainstream idea of ethical is, which is a very fast and loose definition, it is often dictated by these unfair systems. And people have limited choices. And that is the essence of oppression, having the absence of choices, where people are not allowed the opportunity to make choices that are more moral or what we would consider morality, which is why we need to address this concept of criminalizing poverty and how this plays a role in perceived morality, how certain groups of people are specifically impoverished to further exploit them and demonize them in society. This is a political agenda as well as an economic one, which I guess politics and economics, especially in capitalism, they're the same. Anyway.
Feel free to come off mic, Debbie, if you're answering the question.
Thank you. No, I just want to offer a quick reflection on an answer to this. For my thought is that since the United States is considered to be a leader or whatever and defines ways of being because of its power, and therefore they consider itself a moral institution, and other people who even come here perpetuate those lies, like who are migrants, unfortunately follow through with the bootstrap method, and it defines itself to be the one that has the ability to impose the morality, that justifies the morality, that sets the consequences for breaking the moral traditions or rules.
Absolutely, and that definitely gets into the gist of this presentation to normalize the justices. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Indigo Mooncalf says the system positions itself as moral in order to normalize homelessness, poverty, and war. And that goes right to the heart of this workshop about language and dialectics and how language is used. Tav can't hear.
Hello, welcome. Classic rock band Rush has a song called Free Will, and there's a line where it says, if you choose not to decide, you have still made a choice. Yeah, very true. Privilege is being able to not have to make a choice. Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Welcome. Good to see you.
Anything, it's not meant to be that way. You're supposed to be able to hear us, Tav.
Yeah, Taff, try hopping off and jumping back on for us real fast.
Them sorting through the technical
We'll try to
difficulties.
troubleshoot in the chat for you.
Yeah.
So just to hammer in on a reflection, I do appreciate everyone's answers and thoughts. So this one really, we want to understand that morality is something that we can't just declare. They can't just declare that they're moral. Morality is something that has to be proven through outcomes, through material outcomes. So when we see a system continuously produce widespread harm while claiming virtue, it exposes its own illegitimacy. And that's what we're seeing, with the United States. Yeah. So its words are propaganda. Its actions show whose life it values and whose it discards. We can move to the next slide, please.
We have a quick comment in the chat about there's a book titled Some People Need Killing that highlights the relationship between government sanctioned behavior and how that inevitably shaped the beliefs and views of Filipinos during the Duterte presidency. Probably butchered that name. I'm so sorry.
At least you can
So our
acknowledge
next
it.
slide poses
Yeah, we have to consider what is legitimized morality, where the government, these authoritarian powers, are saying it has to come from us, this sense of legitimacy. And if we dictate what morality is, we then have to call into question how they form laws, how they enforce these laws, and understand that there are policies put in place to intentionally impoverish people and exploit them, that this is not viewed as immoral, it's viewed as business, it's viewed as a free market, it's capitalism. And so therefore we have to call into question the morality or lack thereof of capitalism. And if we can't find a sense of moral grounding within capitalism, what does that say about all of these different elements of society that are built around it in American life, but how that impacts the globe at large and how that supports this imperialist domination? And why all of our struggle is connected, especially in this resistance to imperialist violence and oppression.
Why morality must be material. So this kind of talks about morality is something that just can't be declared. It must be material. So morality is not a set of universal truths, just floating above society. Morality emerges from how people are forced to live. So morality is reflecting power relations, and I believe the comrade earlier was going into that. We understand it not as abstract ethics. So for example, the one that we have here on Turtle Island, genocide, land theft, and enslavement were framed as law, progress, and civilization.
Yes.
The same
A
systems now
founding.
cause these things: eviction, poverty wages, and mass incarceration order. So this clearly shows us, why morality can't be abstract. Here,
Yeah. Can we view this government and system that they are claiming is democracy, that is fair and equitable, when it is built off of so much suffering? That we have to call into question their sense of entitlement and who is benefiting from the system. That this definition of morality that they legislate, that they try to claim they know best about, like what sexual deviance is and all of this stuff, that they are using this to uphold these heteropatriarchal, cis, ableist systems that make it so that they can continue existing in this realm of power and impose their own will and domination on other people without any sort of restraint. That's where collective action comes in.
On Turtle Island in the USA, genocide, land theft, and enslavement were framed as, goods, positives. From the very start, the U.S. as a settler colonial state has relied on those things, genocide, land theft, and slavery, to build its power. So in that sense, the social contract, the idea that the state protects the rights and lives of people under its rules, has never existed for the colonized or indigenous peoples here. But when the state is actively harms life instead of protecting it, legitimacy is lost, and its resistance then becomes necessary. So if morality isn't material, if we treat it as abstract or universal, it becomes detached from real life. We see that now. Systems that harm people can claim to be moral because morality is then judged by ideals, not by actual consequences. And people end up obeying. They end up obeying rules that destroy lives, thinking they're doing the right thing while the real harm continues to go unchecked. So let's look into what is right. We can go to the next slide. Pepper Story, if you want to read from this slide.
Sure. What is right? How do we determine between what is right and what is wrong? We'll get into what is wrong, but what is right? Let's define what is right. Materially, what is right is going to be what meets human needs, what provides for humans safety and health. Good.
Yeah, I love this definition because it is directly human-centered, defining morality around the well-being of human beings and providing them dignity and the resources that they need. That this is in direct contrast to looking at human beings as capital and as a workforce to exploit, where this dehumanization is necessary for capitalists to exploit us to the fullest. So an antidote to this is by centering humanness, our humanity, and the things that provide us dignity and the necessities that we need to live life as with resisting these systems as much as possible.
Just goodwill, harm reduction is right. Sustaining life is right. And expanding our collective freedom, that is right. For an example, mutual aid networks that were feeding families when the SNAP benefits were cut, that is right. Tenants organizing to block evictions despite legal processes, that is right. Workers striking because wages no longer cover rent, this is right and good. Communities resisting environmental poisoning, it should be obvious that that is definitely the right thing to do. In Palestine, right looks like resisting starvation, resisting displacement, resisting bombardment in order to survive. Our survival is right. Right is defined by material uplift, not legality, or any approval by any system. Knowing what is right in our hearts and our minds helps guide us as far as what to aim for when speaking about morality. Having
Who
these
decided to
definitions helps us
join?
to understand.
Hey, Teeny.
We should know what's right. But these are right, yeah. We can go to the next slide, unless you have something else. Oh yeah, what is wrong? Do you want to do this one day?
Yeah, you definitely nailed it. Yeah, we just want to overstand, right preserves life and it expands our freedoms. It's not what the system says is allowed. And that's, the golden rule when we're talking about what is right. When we talk about what is wrong, so as you see here, Wrong is anything that produces exploitation, dispossession, displacement, premature death. The laws often protect what is wrong, and some examples are that we see here is wage theft siphoning billions from workers. We see the law protecting evictions, destabilizing whole neighborhoods, police killings justified as neutralizing threats, and failure to provide health care. I know myself, possibly everyone on this call in some form or fashion, uh, these wrongs are being, imposed or being subjected to these wrongs. Some current examples that we do see of what is wrong recently. We can talk about the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. We see how the federal narrative, imminent threat is disputed by local officials and people on the ground. We're seeing that wordplay, how language is being used around self-defense. All of that just highlights how state violence, even when labeled self-defense, can produce death without accountability. A global example we have here is what's going on in Congo. We have entire communities are being displaced, brutalized, and killed, so minerals, so we can be having this meeting, this workshop right now. And they're being called underdeveloped, these undeveloped, countries, when the whole time is organized extraction through violence.
I love that. I fucking love that clarification. It's not underdevelopment. There are so many places that have been colonized and have historically been on the receiving end of Western colonial violence that are described as being underdeveloped or third world countries. And this framing is intentionally supporting oppressors, in my opinion, because it is essentially putting the blame on the people who have gone through this kind of violence. Deeply racist, yes, it's very racist. It also is a victim blaming technique to say, like, oh, we have all of this. We are able to have running water and have these kinds of bathrooms, when it's like, why do you think these places are experiencing this kind of violence with poverty? And I mean, teeny. Oh my god. And how they are still being colonized. Why we have to talk about colonization as a current concept, not just a period of time when there were, like, quote unquote explorers who were finding areas. It is intentional to continue this type of Western hegemony and support the continued extraction and violence towards these people. Yeah, that's exactly right. Of, like, I'm Indian, and people talk about India a lot in these ways, where, like, Laura Loomer, she talks about Indian people in, like, really disgusting ways. And it is to justify, demonizing people. Like, there are political reasons why there are certain in groups and not. But it's like, why do you think India was impoverished the way that it was? It was a huge hub for trade and textiles and spices, and how the British Empire came in and just extracted as much as they could about the place. And then the current order in India is intentionally set up to be corrupt and to be a supplicant of Western powers as well. Like, that's what these colonizers do. That they, once they leave, or they have a colony that receives liberation, that they have to demand, let's be honest, that's how it happens. They don't just leave. And that they then try to corrupt the process of making it so the people have more representation in the government, that they put in a lot of puppets as well. And people who just benefit off of that oppressive order as well. Where did my mouse go? Excuse me. There we go.
We want to look at what's right and wrong through a material lens. What are the outcomes? You know, once again, who is benefiting from these systems and things of that nature? If you only have one side, you know, benefiting, you know, from the system, there's some.
Day.
My apologies.
You're fine.
Yeah, right is for the collective's well-being. When we're going down the right path, we're collectively taking actions so all can have a just and dignified life.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So wrong, in short, is measured by the harm produced, not by whether the law permits it. All right.
Thank you. Right on.
You have an engagement question.
Yeah, we can think about this. We can answer in the chat, or you can come off mute and give us your answer to this question. When survival requires breaking the rules, is the harm caused by resistance or by the system that made that resistance necessary? Our resistance wouldn't be required if we weren't being oppressed in the first place. So is breaking the rules, is that harmful, or is it a response to the harm that is already being caused? Could be a tricky question if you're really
if you're shitty. If you
set
agree
on
with the
following
status
all of the
quo.
rules. You know, the rules weren't necessarily put here to help us. And we wouldn't have to resist if they were.
Absolutely. That's when we see morality being, you know, viewed from a, you know, a idealistic lens and whatnot. We're not, you know, it's taken away from the harm that's being done. Yeah, if I may, we have a response from Harris.
Hard to say yes if you're the
You can come off
beneficiary of
mute,
said
Harris, if you
system.
like.
Yes, precisely. Great way to put it. Seems like they aren't having a bunch of takers from the audience. Oh, there's a problem.
Won't let Harris type what they want. So sorry.
Technical difficulties. They continue.
If you're able to come off mic, you can, Harris.
I can relate to this.
If you need to hop off and hop on, that may be the issue. But if not, we'll definitely try to circle back and hear your thoughts. All right.
Oh, wait, here we go. Tav feels like in our case, the harm is coming from the system. Absolutely. In our Constitution, we have plans in place in case the government causes us harm. Exactly. If we think they didn't know this was coming, they wouldn't have put that clause in there. We've got another comment here, Devi. I want to offer the reflection
framers of the
that
Constitution were slave owners and capitalists and colonizers in their own right, so we have to call that out. But there is a lot of room and argument for this expansive idea of what the Constitution is and what it should be. That it is not a static thing that all of these institutionalists and originalists of the Constitution want to say, like, no, it's all about original intention. That was not the intention. The Constitution was meant to be a living, breathing document, and it should be a way that we have more human dignity in society. That would be nice. That would be nice. I think, you know, like one of the things that is a demand of the general strike is having another constitutional convention. And I think that's a great idea because exactly like what you're saying. It needs to be updated. We need to really address the systemic harm that people experience, get at the root of it, which is the legislation and policy behind it.
Impact of the system is felt and experienced differently dependent on one's identities, marginalizations, and privileges. So I'm reflecting on how those who are oppressed can also very well be oppressors in some form. That is a really interesting and thought-provoking take, Debbie. Thank you. Day, would you like to comment on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The oppressed can definitely move into the position of the oppressor. We see that's what we call something like neocolonialism, or we see a lot of the colonized people assimilating into, the state's values or towards their beliefs and whatnot. We can talk about Obama. We can talk about Kamala. We can talk about Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj recently speaking on Turning Point USA and things of that nature. And that's why education is our first line of defense, because of people who are not aware of themselves, their relationship.
I think something that the movie Sinner does really well. Did I just say sinner? Sinners. Maybe I just didn't say the S that loudly. Anyway, Sinners does this very well in demonstrating how there are different levels to marginalization that people experience systemically and in material conditions. That there were Irish people who were marginalized in many ways, and how they became oppressors to other marginalized people in the situation of Sinners, to Black people, to people of color, and how people are very loath to give up their sense of privilege in the world, even if it means bettering their own conditions. This is where I bring up that book that I've brought up before called Dying by Whiteness, where people continually choose the policy outcomes that will lead to illness and premature death rather than wanting to have these kinds of resources be available to marginalized people. That people are actively not voting for their interests because of the delusion of bigotry.
The community to each other, or their culture, they tend to, it's easier to mold and shape their mind in the image of the oppressors. And then they turn around and start, reproducing those same behaviors and values and beliefs and whatnot. So that's what we are definitely seeing. That's why this workshop and other forms of political education is so important, to help bring that clarity to the people, to our people.
Thank you, Day. And thank you, Debbie, for bringing that up. Very important. Alex says, for sure, the system is what has caused the harm. Very often, we have seen in disasters and revolutions where folks lose the stability or comfort or safety of a government and often self-govern or self-organize in the name of a collective survival. This is what we're doing in this moment, Alex. This is exactly what's happening right now. Between the ongoing political education being put forth by multiple organizations across multiple platforms right now, and all of the mobilization efforts trying to get people connected in their cities, towns, and parishes across Turtle Island and beyond. These are all organizing efforts that will help us get that right back to self-govern, self-organize in the name of our collective survival. Right on. Beautiful reflection. Harris says, I believe that every action has a reaction. Everyone has a right to defend themselves. Only the one initiating the harm hopes you don't believe that. In my opinion.
Is that like an 80s thing?
That's exactly right. They don't want us to fight back, do they? Beth says resistance is not the cause of harm. It is a response to
You
ongoing
did?
harm. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Tav
She's
says,
looking
adding
very
to Debbie's message,
majestic
this happens a lot in the
on the
Latinx
windowsill.
community. It happens a lot in all of our marginalized community, our indigenous communities,
She's
our
very
Black
intrigued
and
by something, I have to say.
indigenous people of color communities, our LGBTQIA plus communities, our disabled and chronically ill communities. We have this same oppression happening just everywhere, just everywhere.
Yeah, you all nailed it. I really enjoyed the insight from you all, and just hearing we're all basically, you know, on the same page. We understand that the harm is caused by the system and not by the people resisting it. Resistance only exists, like Tempest Story said, because the system created those conditions that makes our survival impossible. So it's only logical for us to move in that matter. So when people organize to withhold our
Cats are
labor
such
or act
regal
to protect
creatures, I know.
ourselves, we are not responding to the harm or, you know, creating it. And the moral responsibility then lies with
Welcome
the
back.
system that forced that choice, not those defending their lives and communities. So
Hi.
beautiful.
Exactly. Alex wants to add, when asked about whether or not she condemned violent protests, Angela Davis instead asked people to consider why we focus the choice of violence on us, the oppressed, when it's the system itself that has committed decades and decades of violence against not just its own people, but globally. Angela Davis being one of our revolutionary giants from whom we continue to draw inspiration and strength.
Mm-hmm.
Like blaming the victim, says Tav. Exactly. Exactly.
All right, so I think we can move to the next slide. All right, so we're at justice is about conditions and not punishment, which is imperative for us to understand. We want to essentially reject punishment as logical. We want to root our justice in conditions that doesn't create reproduce harm. So we want to understand justice, what justice isn't first, and what justice is not policing. It's not, you know, revenge or prisons. It's not containment. And we want to understand what justice is. Justice at its core, you know, means removing the conditions that produce the harm. So you we have to understand that you cannot police hunger, you cannot incarcerate poverty, or you can't, you know, manage a genocide. Some examples that we do have is, you know, like in Sudan, you know, the language that they're using
We
and
just have one
framing what's
cat.
going.
We actually have two. The other one is Kit. He is white and fluffy. He has orange ears and a fluffy orange tail. But he doesn't come around very often. The tail just, I know. She keeps like walking right in front of my face and smacking me in the face. That's one of her hobbies. But yeah, Kit very rarely makes an appearance when we have company over. Although he has been coming in more while I've been streaming. After their dinner that usually goes off around 6, he'll come in and like meow a couple of times and then leave. We'll see if he comes in today.
On, you know, as a civil conflict, but you know, materially again, we see the effects, we see the outcome materially. It's genocide. We see the weapons pipeline, we see the foreign funding, we see the geopolitical interests, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I want to
Yeah, this
echo
whole
this.
civil conflict framing that they're talking about really is about victim blaming once again, and to essentially say that's not our problem, that's a them problem, that's a them issue, to justify the violence that's happening, not realizing that there are many interests that are very close to home that are funding this. Some bros doing side quests. Yeah, that's what Kit is doing for sure.
About the conditions that make harm inevitable.
He has very important
It's
things that he's doing throughout the day.
they're
I
doing it
guess.
on purpose.
That's
The system
that's what he's giving off.
is making harm inevitable for profit. Period. That's it, they're making it inevitable. There's nothing to do but defend ourselves.
And the examples that we have here, they show it. We see, how the criminalization of homelessness. We see the aggressive, infrastructure that they have, around to prevent, people from, sleeping on benches and things of that nature. We see how, food access, is there instead of surveillance and fraud, policing, and all of these things. Healthcare access and instead, of debt and denial. So yeah, it's a backwards system, and it really plays with your intelligence. Once you are aware, and once you view morality through a material lens, there's no denying it.
Anarchy wants to add that the brutality and horror are the point.
Yeah,
you are correct.
That's how
Yep.
they manage control.
So
We can
it's
move to the
fascism.
next slide.
So understanding how our language and how our dialectics and how we talk about these justice and oppression and harm and what is right and what is wrong, how we talk about it shapes our morality. Language creates moral categories, and we start thinking about morality in these different boxes.
I really love this. This is why I always talk about how language matters. Words matter. The kind of words that we use, how we use them, who they're directed at, and why, what they're supporting, and why. All of this is very important. And sadly, to the detriment of humanity. The fascists who have been rising around the world, these white supremacists with a lot of colonizing mentality, but not just them. I mean, we're seeing a lot of colonizing mentality happening within the policies and regime of India. How it is all meant to exploit us and for them to enrich themselves, but they have very effectively captured language in a way to frame it on their terms. And part of the way they do this is by capturing all of these media outlets, these ways in which we use language. So the like media conglomerates, social media platforms, newspapers, how all of this is filtered through their moneyed interests. And that is how we're supposed to get accurate information about the world. They have a vested interest in keeping us oppressed and maintaining this system in which we are at their mercy. So they have to frame their language in ways that supports our oppression and their domination. And this is really excellent in the way that they have this displayed. So, for example, worker strikes are economic disruption. That is the worst thing because capitalists are in charge. Police violence, split-second decision, under pressure, trauma on the job. Why is it that cops are allowed to have all of this room to react and have trauma and PTSD, but that any of their victims or people that they are inflicting harm on, that they don't allow this kind of nuance when they're the ones who are disproportionately affected by the power imbalance as well? Colonial expansion is viewed as settlement, yeah. Or social, like providing a sense of society and I'm looking for a specific word. Yeah, their own sense of like colonial morality. I'll probably think of the word in a little bit. and that resistance is categorized as terrorism. We see that this Trump regime, they have categorized being anti-fascist as being a terrorist. And it makes you wonder, if you take issue with the term anti-fascist, what does that make you? Think on that for a sec. Let it sit. What does that mean? Especially when we consider that the KKK has not been declared a terrorist organization in the United States of America, that we have Antifa, something that is not any sort of like centralized organization or entity, but they are using it for political ends to go after individual people. This is how they frame language to erode our rights and violate our human dignity.
Like crime and order or security or freedom. All of these words have certain
because crime
meanings in our
hardly ever
minds.
seems
Just
the word crime, when it is used by people, hardly ever seems to include white collar crime, upper class crime. We should have a conversation about this. That crime is a word that is often racialized, especially when we consider that these policies are intentionally impoverishing groups of people because of arbitrary traits rather than having natural hierarchies of human worth, which is what these white Christian nationalists, what these like ethnic supremacists around the world try to advocate for and institute through policy. And that is just reprehensible because they are trying to justify their superiority by intentionally harming other people. We see this is very common in human nature, in human history. But how this language of resisting them is constantly demonized because, heaven forbid, we ask for or demand the things that we need. That we actually see morality on a human scale rather than a monetary one.
Because of how we have been educated and indoctrinated to believe what they mean. We really need to dig deep and think about what these words actually mean. These terms are shaped by the systems. Here are some examples. They'll call a workers' strike, which is really just workers standing up for their rights in the workplace. They'll call it an economic disruption. It is that, but it is also a workers' strike.
Right.
They'll call police violence or a split-second decision. It's all violence. It doesn't matter whether it happens in a split second or if it is malice aforethought. It's all police violence. Colonial expansion, settlement. You want to think it's one thing that's nice, but it's not. It's all colonial settler. What is the word I'm looking for?
Expansion.
Dispossession. When you're moving someone off of their land, yeah, you can't sugarcoat it. And resistance, if they're going to call it terrorism, that's not what it is. The terrorism is what the resistance has to rise up from within. We just need to be very careful about understanding and understanding what these terms mean and who is putting them out there and why. Globally in Palestine, there's mass killing happening, starvation is happening, and displacement and dispossession are routinely softened. This is what I was thinking of. Softened into words like conflict when it's actually mass killing, or self-defense when they're actually on the offense. Our language doesn't just describe reality, it protects the systems from accountability.
It
They don't
creates
need to be
reality
held
as well.
accountable if the only thing that's
Perceiving is
happening is a
believing.
conflict or they're
That is how the
only
world
defending
functions.
themselves. That's not what's really happening. They're twisting it around, and we need to be smarter than that.
They want to control the narrative. Once you
Exactly.
control the narrative, you shape the people's reality. So they shape how people perceive what is justified and things of that nature. So this we want to understand language isn't neutral. It is can be used against us to defend the systems that's causing harm.
Tav says it's targeted. It reminds them of dog whistling. Yep. Indigo Mooncalf says, let's not forget that corporate media is guilty either for silencing on purpose or ignoring events outright. Our media is absolutely responsible for keeping the systems in control of the narrative. This is where
Which
we're
is why
getting
we
our
see
information.
the
This is where
owners of these media outlets also being very friendly with government officials and being very dedicated towards lobbying efforts. Why is it that we seem to not have any meaningful opposition or like coverage of opposition to the fascist regime among corporate media? Because corporations are much more aligned with this fascist agenda than people want to admit. Or at least now it's becoming much more apparent. Like it already was, but many people now, I think, have little to no trust in corporate media because of the complicity that they have had with the genocide of Palestinians, as well as just the complicity that they've shown with Donald Trump and his rise to power, how they enabled it. It was a result of their lack of holding people to account that allowed him to rise to this kind of power. I mean, they aren't the sole people who are responsible for his rise to power. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but they definitely contributed.
Where we're getting this language is from the media. We are wise to be as discerning as possible when consuming any media.
That's why money in media shouldn't be a thing.
I heard that. Oh, Anarchy says the word migration is a huge one. We need to start reframing the concept of migration from a choice to a force. Exactly. We should be free to go wherever we like, not forced to move from one country, city, state, or parish to another.
Yeah. Another one is the perfect the land of the free, but in fact we have the highest incarceration rate. So yeah, it's a lot
Yeah,
of playing, with
exactly. Land of
wordplay and language and things
for-profit
like that.
prisons.
It can definitely be used as a containment as
I need to
well.
plug this in.
We can move to the next slide.
Thank you,
Right.
May.
What we do want to understand is language has its limits. Language is a tool also. It's definitely a tool like we talked about, can be used against us, or it can be used, for us in our best interest. If if we take it on our own to define what's really going on and speak truth to power. So materially, reality exceeds language. If you ever experience,
I do need to
a
step out
traumatic
for a sec,
situation and was like,
but I'm
I
going to
just don't
keep
have
this
the
playing. I'll
words
be right
to
back.
really express how I'm feeling. That's definitely true. Language cannot fully capture everything, that's going on. Like these examples, the terror of eviction, the exhaustion of poverty, the trauma of state violence, and the totality of genocide. So, words can point towards truth, but material reality carries the evidence. And again, this is why people living under oppression often say, if you lived it, you'd understand it. So we do want to understand that. I do see some comments as well.
Yeah,
in regards
Debbie.
to-
says the academic institutions and the government implement and enforce what is taught in K through 12 and higher education. Yeah, this is the indoctrination that's been happening for generations, just since the very beginning of American colonization. Harris says the alchemy of language is just as real as science, and that is 100% true. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Debbie feels, I feel the limitation often is because folks are limited to English as their first and only language, something else that they want to control and make it unpopular to be as well informed as we possibly can be.
Absolutely. Let's take it to the next slide. Tempestar, if you want to take it over.
Yeah, material reality cuts through ideology. We don't need to just think it, we are actually living it. Because language can be manipulated, material reality becomes the anchor. Our lived experience is where the reality lives. Material reality exposes eviction, its harm, regardless of the rules or the laws or the policies or the procedures. Eviction is harm. When you're forcing someone out of their home and forcing them into the street, that's harm. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's still harm and it still hurts. Sanctions as starvation, regardless of justification. Is there any justification for starvation? To starve a people, to starve a single individual human, where there is no justification for that. It doesn't matter. You can try all day long to say, oh, it's because of this or because of that. It's not okay. Starvation is wrong. Pipelines as poisoning, regardless of branding. Doesn't matter who is doing the polluting. It's polluting and it's wrong. Globally, we're having these current happening right now and happening for a long time genocide in Congo, Sudan, and Palestine, regardless how the media frames it. They want to tell you that it's one side versus the other and that one side is right and one side is wrong. The genocide is what is wrong. The killing is what is wrong. The outcomes expose legitimacy. These forever wars, these foreign wars for natural resources are illegitimate wars. It doesn't matter what media says or what the system says or what the structures say. Morally, in our actual material reality, genocide is wrong. Starvation is wrong. Eviction is wrong. Pollution is wrong. And we know this. We understand this deeply because it goes beyond language. Indigo Mooncalf has a comment that I can read. Michael Parenti in his book Reinventing Reality says thus.
Okay. Something that I wanted to touch on that I heard from afar that they were discussing, these sanctions that are happening right now against Cuba and the starvation of the people there is completely immoral, undeserved, illegal, in my opinion, and it has to end. This is what empire does, and unless it is stopped, it will keep going and going until something comes to stop it. That's just how it works, especially with this late stage capitalism that we're in, just the endless greed that isn't going away. These people are showing no sign of wanting to show restraint. So that's where we come in, why we have to organize and make them stop.
The press can effectively direct our perceptions when we have no information to the contrary. And when the message seems congruent with earlier notions about these events, which themselves may be in part media created. In this way, the original implant is also a reinforcement of earlier perceptions. Seemingly distinct reports about diverse events have a hidden continuity and a cumulative impact that again support previous views. To see this process as one of minimal effects, because it merely reinforces existing views and does not change them, is to overlook the fact that it was never intended to change them and was indeed designed to reinforce the dominant orthodoxy. Education is repetition. Repetition is how we learn. So if they're going to repeat these same lies over and over and over again, this is what we learn. Yeah, wonderful comment.
I don't know if that's what I would call education. I think that's just brainwashing, but there you go.
Thank you for sharing that.
Should we move to the next slide?
I think we can, yeah.
Awesome. So we understand language and material conditions interacting dynamically, language, power, and struggle. We want to see the dialectical relationship between all three. Material conditions produce harm or freedom, suffering or liberation. Language interprets those conditions. And we see power controls dominant narratives. So whoever is in power, um, quote unquote, sets the bar for what is moral and what is not moral. But we do see struggle interrupts this process. Struggle for us, the people, the proletariat, the working class, struggle for us to create our own language, to take control of the narrative. Words like mutual aid, abolition, survival programs, settler colonialism, food apartheid, genocide. These are the people defining the reality that we're experiencing, taking control of the narrative and speaking truth to power. No.
Yeah, and I mean, not to interrupt while saying such powerful things, it is literally doing that, taking control of the narrative, that they are no longer able to posture as being an authority on what the story is, that when they control language, they control how we perceive the world and the kind of information that we get. So when we reclaim language, when we form language that is new or do it in new ways, that it helps us to quite literally take our power back, to actually be using our voices in the way that we need to. It's one of the reasons why like we shouldn't underestimate the power of speaking out of our voices. I know that sounds cheesy and perhaps it is naive, but we all have a perspective that they are afraid of. I mean, for the people who haven't been brainwashed, they are afraid of our individuality. They are afraid that we see through this narrative and that we will actually do something about it, which is why they try to censor so many things, why they try to make it so that people from marginalized communities are not uplifted in mainstream spaces. So, in a meaningful way, in a revolutionary way, because they are afraid of our numbers and they're afraid of our individuality and the power that that holds. So, stand your ground. Be confident in for the things that you have thought critically about in your sense of morality, the sense of the world, be confident in it, because having that reassurance is incredibly important in fighting fascism. And knowing what we believe in, this is a huge tool that we can, must, and have been using.
We're not going hungry. We're gonna create these programs. I mean, no, we're not out creating chaos. We're not having disorderly conduct, we're feeding our neighbors. No, this is it's a food desert here. People aren't don't have access to food. It's a food apartheid. That's what's going on. It's not the people's own individual choices. It is systemic. It's happening on purpose, and so on and so forth. So this is a struggle that we see between language, power, and struggle. So in short, power shapes words, words shape perception, and then struggle reshapes both. Because we understand that the state empire, they also struggle as well. As Kamala said, are working tirelessly to keep us keep the boot on our necks in so many words.
Yeah. Right on, Day. No, you're 10,000% correct. Thank you. Yeah.
So those are the
10,000%.
parts
That's a lot.
to justify. And we
For
want to go to
sure.
legitimate resistance, and this is the juicy part right here.
Okay. All right. What
The
is
juicy part.
legitimate
Okay.
resistance? When a system cannot provide survival, when a system requires exploitation, wage slavery, and the homelessness, when the system enforces harm through violence, like we're seeing right now, state violence, or even just the violence of capitalism, or when a system protects profit.
Which is why it's important to also reframe what violence is. That's what they're doing, talking about this shit, and what we're doing as well. Because violence usually is, when it is defined by capitalists, it is usually anything that is against their capital. That is violence. Human beings are not the recipients of violence. This is why we have so much harm that goes unaddressed, because it is not human centered. It is only centered on capital and protecting it.
Over life, prioritizing the dollar over the life of people and planet, it becomes illegitimate. The system itself becomes an illegitimate system. People are not bound to obey systems that require their harm to function. We are not morally obligated to follow any rules that oppress us, harm us, or cause us any of these ineffable, unnameable emotions like the terror and the exhaustion and the frustration and the anxiety and the despair. We're not bound by any moral obligation to follow any of those rules, those illegitimate laws and rules. A general strike is not chaos. It is a material refusal to labor, to continue to labor for our exploitation. And it's material refusal to fund the harm that we are causing, not just in our own communities and neighborhoods, not just in Minneapolis
Look
or
at what's
Portland or Chicago.
happening at the airport. Yes, we can't pay TSA, but we can pay ICE. Exactly. And the fact that it is this refusal to compromise at all when it comes to ICE and that kind of state sanctioned violence. That should be a huge red flag to everyone. That these people are very insistent on protecting the people who are doing all of this violence, who are like the arm of this kind of project that is institutionalized and being accepted by the general public, because we have an ethnic cleansing maniac known as Stephen Miller and people like him in the White House that are, and that we see are being supported through Congress, that they are very insistent about this, continuing this violence, that we have to stop this because it looks like the so-called opposition party, known as the Democratic Party, really is not going to do much about it. So that's where it comes to us, because they're not listening to us. So what do we have left when it comes to getting our needs met? We have to show robust resistance to what is happening with protests that come with demands, and we also have to halt the economy.
Chicago, but across the country and across the world. We are funding harm in countries that we will never visit. The general strike is material
I hate
refusal
Tom
to
Homan
consent.
so much. I know
To
Tom
consent
Homan
to
is
the
such a
rules
creep.
that are giving rise to the resistance in the first place. The legitimate resistance redirects collective power towards survival and self-determination. This is what we are building with the General Strike US. Our self-determination is a natural right that no one can take away from us. It cannot be made illegal. It cannot be outlawed. Self-determination is a natural right that we're all born with, and our survival. We're born with it. They can't take it away from us. That is illegitimate. Resistance is not immoral. It's a response to structural malicious violence, the violence that is being visited upon us by the imperialism, the settler colonial capitalism. This violence can't go unanswered. The general strike must refuse to accept and consent to this violence. Again, not just here, but everywhere across the world.
And there's I think a comrade mentioned earlier, the Declaration of Independence, citing along the Constitution, framing the right of people to alter or abolish a government that becomes destructive to life and liberty. And the Black Panther Party 10-point platform, point 10, also calls to that as well. It calls for the right to raise arms for self-defense against oppression and to resist a government that systemically denies people their rights. Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a safety valve, but I mean, it wouldn't have to be put into the Constitution if they didn't know that it was going to end late stage capitalism into fascism in the first place. They knew exactly what they were doing.
absolutely. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Temple Story.
You're
Yeah, because
welcome.
that was the
Here's
intention.
this might be our last quick reflection, if I remember correctly. If legitimacy comes from protecting life, what responsibility do people have when legitimacy collapses? This is a really good question, very thoughtful. If you've got an answer, you can come off mute, get on the mic and tell us what you think about this, or get in the chat. Tell us what you think about this. If legitimacy comes from protecting life, what responsibility do people have when legitimacy collapses? Do we have a responsibility? What is our responsibility? If the system isn't going to be protecting our lives, what do we need to do? The system is revealed as illegitimate. Then what?
Exactly. Then what?
Have I
Then we take
stumped
things
us
into
all?
our
Tav
hands.
says the responsibility of the people is to protect ourselves and each other.
Absolutely.
And Harris says protect each other. And Chave Fenelon says build dual power. All power to the people. Alex says I genuinely believe we do have a responsibility to each other to abolish the systems in place that harm us. Yes, yes, yes. Tav says overthrow the system that failed us. These are so inspirational. You guys are bringing me so much hope. world. Debbie says, by any means necessary. Right on. Right on. As well directed and led by those who align with our value to coexist with compassion, care,
She's
love,
extremely
kindness for all
passionate.
living beings, including our planet. You are speaking my language. This is where we are. Indigo Mooncalf says, yes. This is our optimism talking. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I was gonna bring up more than just with each other as humans, but like across all of our life, you know, going back um to natural law and uh that we I've lost it. But
No, I hear you. All sentient life. All sentient life.
yeah, and the earth, like we have a stewardship with the earth, like going back to indigenous teachings
Exactly.
and bringing those back, I think, because when we talk about legitimacy, we're still talking about what you know, what is a white supremacist or colonial version of legitimacy, and we're not talking about um a solidarity per se. And I think solidarity is the responsibility, point blank. But yeah, you know what yeah.
Absolutely. 10,000%. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes.
I've
This
never
is
heard
our
anyone say 10,000%. This is the first person, but they've said it multiple times. I just find that amusing.
this is our responsibility to ourselves and to each other and to our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our towns, our parishes, our country, our continent, all of our lands. Our responsibility is to us, not to the systems not to the structures that oppress us. Love it. It'll bring me
Absolutely.
so much hope.
Absolutely. Lovely answers. You all nailed it. That brings us to our last slide, and 5 minutes before the hour, so this is definitely a good time. And yeah, so to sum everything up, at the end of the day, we want to leave this workshop with the understanding that morality.
Why stop there? 10 billion. Yeah, exactly. Why limit our imagination? Let's go along
Isn't
with
an
that theme.
abstract debate. It's about what systems actually do to people, what they do for the people. Consent cannot be coerced. Legitimacy must be earned through trust, and it can be withdrawn. And we have that moral responsibility to do so, like you all said, to each other and to all sentient life. So when a system consistently produces harm, exploitation, displacement, or death, obedience to it stops being neutral, and compliance becomes participation at that point. Resistance isn't about chaos or
Exactly.
ideology. It's a response to material conditions that make survival impossible for many. And we want to walk away understanding, overstanding that a revolutionary general strike is not symbolic. It's a collective self-defense. It withholds labor, profit, and consent from systems that harm us, harm the planet. And that's why collective refusal isn't just strategic, it's necessary. When people refuse together, we aren't breaking legitimacy. We are revealing that it was never there to begin with. All power to the people, and thank you all for being here.
Please come and see us in our Discord server. We have Tab says eat the government. We have a we have a website that has the strike card on there. You can sign the strike card. You can get into our Instagram accounts, get in.
Okay. I'm going to. So check them out. Okay. So getting into this training, BIPOC-queer health training. Again, this is something that my incredible friend Gabriel made and oversaw. So the education is spectacular. And I wanted to go through this together. I helped tell test some of this. So that's cool. And now this is my first time going through it like all the way, or once it is published, at least. Okay. So we have a pre-course survey. What is your profession? I do prefer not to answer. I'm not revealing. Okay. Gender non-queer. I would say moderately knowledgeable. How well do you understand good understanding, probably. I don't want to be prideful about it. How would you rate your capability in providing culturally competent care to the BIPOC LGBTQ community? What specific skills? Maybe let's say, referring to people in the terms they prefer. Okay, yes. Subscribe to the listserv.
Hello and welcome to Course 1, the current state of health equity for HIV and syndemics, what you should know. This course is the first in the three-part Building
Look at how
Equity,
cute it
Serving
is.
LGBTQ plus BIPOC communities training series brought to you by AIDS United University. This series is designed for health professionals who provide care to those affected by and living with HIV. It will also discuss the ways you can address inequitable impacts of HIV and partnering syndemics within your organization. This e-learning series was supported in part by a generous donation from Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson was not involved in the development, design, or coordination of the course content. AIDS United does not have any additional financial disclosures or conflicts of interest pertaining to the material
Johnson &
presented
Johnson
in this
is
course.
like, we are covering our bases legally.
If you have any questions or run into technical issues while navigating this platform, please...
This highlights the unfortunate necessity in the system of nonprofits needing large donations from corporations, where the system, because it has all of these just huge gaps in a safety net, a social safety net for people, that nonprofits need to come in and fill these gaps. But we see how this continues to perpetuate the same systems to allow them to continue and not hold the government accountable in providing these things that they should be providing in the first place. So, just throwing that out there. This is sick. I know.
Don't hesitate to reach out by
incredible.
emailing the AIDS United e-learning team at education@aidsunited.org. Before we get started, let's learn about the features of this e-learning platform. Keep in mind that you can complete the courses in one sitting, or you can return to your AIDS United University student dashboard at any time to pick up where you left off.
Her doing kicking her legs, that was cute. Navigating the e-learning platform. Okay, let's do this.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your way around this online course. What you're looking at here is the course player. Yours might look a little different than mine here. Your instructor has probably customized this to make sure that you have the best learning experience. On the left here, you can see all the lessons in this course. You can open and close chapters and click on lessons to view them. This is a video lesson, and you can press play to start watching it. When you're finished, you can select this button to mark it complete and continue on. Your overall progress in this course is here. There are lesson options in this part of the course player, and you can join in discussions if your instructor has them enabled for this course. Leave a post or reply to a thread to join the conversation. You can get back to your student dashboard and account settings by selecting this button. That's all for now. Happy learning.
Okay, Course 1 overview.
Now that we have covered the features of the e-learning platform, let's talk about the purpose and objectives of this course. The purpose of this course is to increase awareness of the current state of BIPOC and LGBTQ+ health inequities, and to also strengthen the ability of healthcare professionals to engage and support patients living with and affected by HIV and its comorbidities and syndemics. Before we get started, let's review some terminology that you will hear frequently throughout the course that we just mentioned in our objectives. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. LGBTQ+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and all other minority sexual orientations and gender identities. Now that we have completed our overview, we want to hear from you. The purpose of the discussion space is to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts and exchange ideas and experiences with your fellow learners. Throughout this course, there will be several opportunities to answer a discussion question. In addition to responding to the discussion question, consider taking a moment to read and respond to what others have submitted. On the top right corner of the screen, you will see a discussion button. Click on it to join the conversation. Keep in mind that you will have to enter a title for your response. The title can be anything you like. For example, you can say, "Hi from Washington, D.C., or Discussion 1, your first discussion question is, what is one thing that you are looking forward to learning by the end of this course?" When you are ready to move forward, click the Continue button below on the next chapter entitled, The Current State of HIV to get started.
Okay. You completed Introduction. Continue.
The current state of HIV speaks to not only data, but coinciding trends that include syndemics and social determinants of health. It is important to acknowledge that HIV does not...
Social determinants of health, I don't remember if they'll get into what this means, but this is a public health term that just talks about the many factors that contribute to someone's overall health. And there are things such as, here, maybe I'll just look this up in display. There's probably some sort of like infographic. Social determinants of health. Yep, there are plenty of these. Okay. So education, access and quality, healthcare and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context, and economic stability. So getting a little bit more in depth, this can look like having access to education, having early childhood education, literacy, higher access to higher education, the kinds of languages that they speak, economic stability. So having employment, growing up in a household with employment, housing instability, poverty, food insecurity, all of these things contribute to someone's overall health, and the amount of stress or not that they feel in their daily lives also are indicative of them having more or less negative or positive health outcomes as adults. So this is why we talk about your zip code being more definitive of your health outcomes than your genetic code. That is something that is said in the public health world a lot, because we see with zip codes that policy is involved. Very specific intentional policy that leads to people having disproportionate negative health outcomes as a way to support this system of white supremacy, colonizing mentality that is a form of genocide, to be clear, in order to uphold this capitalist system. So that's what we're talking about.
Discriminate. HIV can affect people of any race, gender, sexuality, age, or geographic location. According to the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, it is estimated that 1.2 million people were living with HIV in the United States in 2021, and of this group approximately 87% knew they had HIV. Social determinants of health lead to inequitable health outcomes, particularly for LGBTQ+ communities and racial and ethnic minorities. Social determinants of health, which you will find abbreviated as SDOH throughout the course, are the non-medical factors that influence health outcomes. They are the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age, and the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of daily life. These forces and systems include economic policies and systems, development agendas, social norms, social policies, racism, climate change, and political systems.
Showing the Supreme Court.
We will now review some of the national data that speaks specifically to which communities are disproportionately affected by HIV. The data we'll review is from the CDC's HIV surveillance report on diagnoses of HIV infection in the United States and dependent areas for 2021. It is important to note that when looking at data over time, the COVID-19 pandemic may have impacted data for 2020 due to its impact on access to HIV testing, care-related services, and case surveillance activities in state and local jurisdictions. When looking at the data for 2021, we see that trends for transmission category remain consistent with past years, with the majority of transmission coming from sexual contact between men. Gay, bisexual, and other men who reported male-to-male sexual contact are the populations most affected by HIV.
Just to read out these statistics, 71% were among gay, bisexual, and other men who reported male-to-male sexual contact. 22% were among people who reported heterosexual contact. 7% were among people who inject drugs.
It is important to note that some studies have indicated that trans women are heavily affected by HIV but lack representation in national data sets.
Yes.
The data,
and that is intentional for invisibilization, especially when we consider when people are disproportionately affected by something. If they are not represented in the data, it's intentional that they are not brought in as subjects. And the whole research process, why we need to constantly be talking about decolonizing science and research and the medical world as well, because there are many practices and beliefs that perpetuate these colonizing beliefs that are deeply anti-Black, anti-queer, ableist, and that we have to be incorporating people who are most affected by particular diseases, illnesses, situations, so that we can figure out why and also to help people. But that's how you know that this is not about helping people, these systems that we have in place, that they ensure that this is the result. That is what is
also
happening.
shows that heterosexual contact represented those who were affected with a rate of 22%. Injection drug use contact represented those who were affected with a rate of 7%. Male-to-male sexual contact and injection drug use contact represented those who were affected with a rate of 4%. Perinatal contact represented those who were affected with a rate of 1%, and other contact represented those who were affected with a rate of less than 1%. Let's look at differences in new HIV diagnoses by gender. Men continue to be heavily affected by HIV, accounting for 79% of new HIV diagnoses in 2021. Women accounted for 18%, followed by transgender women accounting for 2%, and transgender men and people of additional gender identities accounting for less than 1% respectively. According to the CDC's 2021 HIV surveillance data, Black and African American people shouldered the highest burden of disease at 40%, followed by Hispanic Latino people at 29%, and white people at 25%. Individuals who identify as multiracial, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islander groups represented the remaining 6% of the total number of new HIV diagnoses that year. People of color are disproportionately affected by HIV. Although Hispanic and Latino individuals make up nearly the same percentage of new HIV diagnoses as white individuals, according to the 2020 U.S. Census, 18.7% of the population is Hispanic or Latino and 61.6% are white. Black and African American individuals account for 12.4% of the population in 2021, but 40% of HIV diagnoses in 2021. Racism, HIV stigma, discrimination, homophobia, poverty, and barriers to healthcare continue to drive these disparities. This final graph shows geographic variation in HIV diagnoses. The South accounted for more than half of new HIV diagnoses in 2021, followed by the West with 20%, the Northeast.
It's not an accident that the South infamously has low access to healthcare, that hospitals are not funded, that there are hospital deserts, that people who are experiencing the social determinants of health are experiencing them to very intense degrees. That's not to say that it doesn't happen in other states, but that there is direct policy that lead to these social determinants of health that is actively pursued, that are actively pursued in these very conservative states.
With 14%, the Midwest with 13%, and U.S. independent areas with 1%. Now we will watch a health disparities video that will demonstrate how health disparities impact communities on many levels.
Okay, up next, health disparities. We may just have time for course 1. Who does HIV affect? People of any race, gender, sexuality, age, or geographic location. What is the definition of social determinants of health? Non-medical factors that influence health outcomes. Yep. Yay! 100%! Okay. You can tell what kind of kid I was in school.
In this lesson, we will cover and provide context into the phenomenon of syndemics and the drivers of the HIV epidemic. In this section, we will explore the components of the social determinants of health, intersectionality, and syndemics. The CDC defines syndemics as synergistically interacting epidemics. Essentially, a syndemic is when 2 or more epidemics occur simultaneously for the same community and interact. Syndemics do not occur without the present social and health conditions in a community and occurs when multiple pandemics or epidemics are present simultaneously. Let's cover some terminology related to syndemics. Comorbidity means that there is more than one disease or condition present in the same person at the same time. An epidemic happens when there is a higher level of illness or health condition than is expected in a community or region. A pandemic is an epidemic that happens worldwide or over a very wide area and usually impacts a large number of people. An endemic happens when a condition is continuously present in a location or population. It is possible for a syndemic in a community to be a comorbidity in an individual. For example, an individual living with HIV may also have diabetes or COVID-19. Syndemics do not have to be limited to medical conditions or diseases and can include things like climate change or healthcare access. As we think about syndemics and their impact on BIPOC LGBTQ+ communities, it is also important to understand intersectionality.
Yes,
Intersectionality is a way of understanding social relations by examining intersecting forms of discrimination. Let's watch a quick video to learn more.
Okay, let's. What is intersectionality? This is why this training's so good.
What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a way of understanding social relations by examining intersecting forms of discrimination. This means acknowledging that social systems are complicated and that many forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, and ageism, might be present and active at the same time in a person's life. Everyday approaches to building equality tend to focus on one type of discrimination, for instance sexism, and then work to address only that specific concern. But while the career of a young, white and able-bodied woman might improve with gender equality protections, an older, black, disabled lesbian may continue to be hampered by racism, ageism, ableism and homophobia in the workplace. Intersectionality is about understanding and addressing all potential roadblocks to an individual or group's well-being. But it's not as simple as just adding up oppressions and addressing each one individually. Racism, sexism and ableism exist on their own, but when combined, they compound and transform the experience of oppression. Intersectionality acknowledges that unique oppressions exist, but is also dedicated to understanding how they change in combination. The roots of intersectionality lie within the Black feminist movement, with legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw originating the term. Crenshaw felt that anti-racist and feminist movements were both overlooking the unique challenges faced by Black women. She stated that legislation about race is framed to protect Black men, and legislation about sexism is understood to protect white women. So simply combining racism and sexism together does not therefore protect Black women. Intersectional theory is now applied across a range of social divisions and also to understandings of domination, such as those associated with whiteness, masculinity, and heterosexuality. Intersectionality is not only about multiple identities, and it's not a simple answer to solving problems around equality and diversity. It is, however, an essential framework as we truly engage with issues around privilege and power and work to bring them into the open. Intersectionality means listening to others, examining our own privileges, and asking questions about who may be excluded or adversely affected by our work. As importantly, it means taking measurable action to invite, include, and centre the voices and work of marginalised individuals.
Okay. Complete and continue.
Intersectionality is promoted and explained in a few ways. Intersectionality promotes an understanding of human beings as shaped by the interaction of different social locations, for example, race/ethnicity, indigeneity, gender, class, sexuality, geography, age, disability/ability, migration status, and religion. These interactions occur within a context of connected systems and structures of power, such as laws, policies, state governments, and other political and economic unions, religious institutions, and media. Through such processes, interdependent forms of privilege and oppression shaped by colonialism, imperialism, racism, homophobia, ableism, and patriarchy are created. Let's continue to look at intersectionality as it relates to health and the social determinants of health. From an intersectional perspective, inequities are never the result of single, distinct factors. Some of those factors that impact health and the social determinants of health include occupation, sexuality, age, geographic location, ability, aboriginality, income, family status, gender, immigrant status, heritage/history, language,
Family status,
religion, ethnicity.
What does that mean? Is it like class?
Race, education. Let's look at stigma and intersectionality more closely with an example of how pervading intersecting stigmas are experienced by people living with HIV.
Or just stability of a home.
HIV-related stigma and discrimination, defined as prejudice, negative attitudes, abuse, and maltreatment directed at people living with HIV, is a major factor contributing to the global HIV epidemic. HIV-related stigma devalues and stereotypes people living with HIV.
This is how we combat all of that, is by education. This is why this training is so important and cool that it exists.
It also increases vulnerability to HIV infection by reducing access to HIV prevention, testing, treatment, and support. At the personal, micro level, HIV-related stigma can make it hard for people to take tests to determine their HIV status or to disclose their status to other people. Many people living with HIV live in silence and fear of disclosure. At the social/community, meso level, it can mean that people living with HIV are ostracized from their communities. At the organizational/political, macro level, it can mean that healthcare workers treat people living with HIV differently and that governments are deterred from taking fast, effective action against the HIV epidemic. In addition, HIV-related stigma is negatively associated with well-being among people living with HIV. Thus, among people living with HIV, those who have experienced HIV-related stigma have higher levels of mental and physical illness. So, when we think about how the multiple factors that outline our lives impact even our healthcare, we must take into consideration all the intersections and barriers communities must navigate that reside in individual aspects of their lives, including racial stigma, HIV-related stigma, poverty stigma, etc. This is also seen in barriers accessing and sustaining services in our social determinants of health. As discussed in the previous slides, syndemics can be epidemic or pandemic diseases and medical conditions or social determinants of health. HIV is syndemic with discrimination due to homophobia, transphobia, and racism. HIV is also syndemic with social determinants of health, including those in the areas of economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education access and quality, community safety and social context, including incarceration and police brutality, and the opioid epidemic and substance use, and healthcare access and quality.
With law enforcement.
HIV is also syndemic with hepatitis, STIs, tuberculosis, COVID-19, diabetes, and pox among other infections, diseases, and medical conditions like aging. It is important to note that syndemics can also be more than two epidemics. Racism, homophobia, and transphobia intersect with HIV and the other epidemics and create disparities, especially among BIPOC and LGBTQ+ populations.
All right, up next, syndemic case study, HIV and COVID. We may need to end before finishing this course just to get to the reading, but
HIV and COVID-19 spelled out specifically how the workforce identified syndemic approaches to address negative intersectional outcomes with our most vulnerable communities. Although people living with HIV who were adequately being treated were not considered in the high-risk group for COVID-19, there is much we do not know about how COVID-19 affected people with HIV. People with advanced or untreated HIV are especially vulnerable. People living with HIV have other risk factors associated with serious cases of COVID-19 like older age and higher rates of certain health conditions. In the United States, where half of people diagnosed and living with HIV are age 50 and older, this is especially important to be mindful of. In addition, some HIV and COVID-19 treatments interact, so it is important for providers and clients to discuss together before starting COVID-19 treatment. There are no known interactions between COVID-19 preventative medicines and HIV treatment. It is also important to acknowledge that COVID-19 disrupted HIV prevention and care and exacerbated inequities in access to HIV prevention and care, as many organizations that provided these services had to shut down or move staffing to COVID-19. We will now watch a video discussing the intersection of HIV and COVID-19.
Okay, I do want to watch the intersection.
Four decades after it was first identified, HIV continues to affect millions of people worldwide. Although the world has made significant progress in recent decades, important targets for 2020 were not met. We are not on track to reach our Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 unless we change our approaches. Division, disparity, and disregard for human rights have all allowed HIV to become and remain a global health crisis. Now, COVID-19 is further increasing inequalities faced by people living with HIV, with low access to COVID-19 vaccines and many disruptions in HIV prevention, testing, treatment, and care. children, adolescents, and men, and populations at high HIV risk, such as men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, sex workers, transgender people, and people in prisons are among those who are not able to access HIV testing, prevention, and care services. That's why WHO is calling on global leaders and citizens to rally to confront the inequalities that drive AIDS and to ensure everyone, everywhere, has access to HIV services. This means finding innovative ways to safely deliver person-centered HIV prevention, testing, treatment, and care services. Ensuring that all groups of people at risk continue to obtain the services they need. Ensuring access to better and safer medicines for children and pregnant and breastfeeding women. Protecting, engaging, and supporting health workers to provide care that is kind, respectful of human rights, and without stigma. In short, it means renewing and revitalizing the global fight to end AIDS by 2030. We all have a role to play. Help us make this happen.
World Health Organization. Okay. Let's continue that tomorrow. But as you know, I previously worked for the Utah Health Department, and there was already so much stigma and resistance that people in the HIV program received in getting anything done, really, because there was so much oversight into what they were doing and saying that a lot of their reports were suppressed, which is a form of data suppression. People couldn't speak freely about the programs, that there were all of these excuses to take away funding from very successful projects. This is before the Trump administration, by the way. So working against this HIV stigma is very important. We see that it impacts many different kinds of people, but how it is ensured the continuing of this disease through stigmatizing people. That when we are experiencing these negative effects of a white supremacist, colonizing, capitalist, heteropatriarchal, cis, oppressive system, it makes it so that certain people are relegated to the margins, which is what marginalization means, and that because of this marginalization, there are very real world impacts and harms that happen. So this is why it's important to talk about this in terms of the scope of policy and also with the human impact and how it leads to more disease, a lower lifespan, and just lower quality of life in general, and that this doesn't have to exist. That this is a man-made situation, emphasis on the man with like patriarchy shit, but that we have an obligation to our fellow man in bettering our circumstances and understanding that we all deserve opportunity and access to basic resources to get what we need to survive. This is why it's important that we strike, have a national strike, a world strike. Please check out these forms in my profile. Okay, let's move on to the reading. I'm getting out my gloves. Oh yeah, I was gonna go over banned book club. I'll do that really quickly. Never mind. Okay. So we see that Jonas is having more lessons, and that when he wakes up in the morning, that he is feeling this unsatisfied feeling, which is this feeling of longing and wanting more that is important in the human existence, but also as a narrative and like driving force for the story. He was left upon wakening with the feeling that he wanted, even somehow needed, to reach the something that waited in the distance. That feeling that it was good, that it was welcoming, that it was significant. So this is after he has his dreams of sliding down the hill on that sled. His first memory that was transmitted to him by the giver. We see that he starts to notice something interesting about Fiona's hair, the girl that he's starting to like because he actually has that capacity now because he's not being forced to take this medication that people don't feel any sort of arousal, I guess. So this is him trying to describe it. Jonas told him about the experience with the apple, then the moment on the stage when he had looked out and seen that same phenomenon in the faces of the crowd. Then today, just now outside, it happened with my friend Fiona. She herself didn't change exactly, but something different about her changed for a second. Her hair looked different, but not in its shape, not in its length. I can't quite... Jonas paused, frustrated by his inability to grasp and describe what exactly had occurred. Okay. Now I want to skip to the part where they're talking about color. This is where he discovers what it is. The giver sighed. How to explain this? Once back in the time of memories, everything had a shape and size the way things still do, but they also had a quality called color. There were a lot of colors, and one of them was called red. That's the one you are starting to see. Your friend Fiona has red hair, quite distinctive actually. I've noticed it before. When you mentioned Fiona's hair, it was the clue that told me you were probably beginning to see the color red. Interesting. And also he's being observant and is clocking that he probably likes Fiona. But this was the first time in reading a book when I was younger, realizing, like, oh, how would you describe a color? How would you describe a color to someone who hasn't seen color? And it made me realize to a different extent what some people must experience when they are colorblind, of like not knowing, like perceiving the world always in one way and then finding out that like other people don't perceive it that way. And like here are the different signs. So this is where they're talking about why color disappeared. The giver shrugged. Our people made that choice, the choice to go to sameness. Before my time, before the previous time, back and back and back. We relinquished color when we relinquished sunshine and did away with differences. He thought for a moment. We gained control of many things, but we had to let go of others. Yeah, gained control of humanity, but had to let go of your humanity, what it means to be a human, what makes you a human. And then he says, now we must work, and I've thought of a way to help you with the concept of color. Close your eyes and be still now. I'm going to give you a memory of a rainbow. It's like that also was such evocative imagery for me to read when I was younger, of imagining, like being able to comprehend what it is like to see a rainbow for the first time, as if you hadn't seen it, and that you actually have more of a grasp on language and can express like what you think about it. Okay, so we see that Jonas in the next chapter is starting to push back against some of the restraints against him, or he can feel increasingly isolated with what is going on around him. Everyone seems to be happy and content with what is going on, and he has this feeling of longing and of there being much more, and it makes him angry. He said he found that he was often angry now, irrationally angry at his group mates, that they were satisfied with their lives, which had none of the vibrance his own was taking on, and he was angry at himself that he could not change that for them. He tried, without asking permission from the giver, because he feared or knew that it would be denied. He tried to give his new awareness to his friends. So apparently he tried to give it to Asher and it didn't work. That people have to have a certain, capability or receptivity to it. And so, especially with him not taking these medications, it really is making his emotions come to the surface, things that, he wasn't normally as upset about. That he seems to be a little bit shorter with Lily, his sister. Then he wonders about what the giver does and seems to see how lonely and sad he is. And there comes this point where Jonas actually sees how much the giver disagrees with the community. And it is this instance. My instructors in science and technology have taught us about how the brain works, Jonas told him eagerly. It's full of electrical impulses. It's like a computer. If you stimulate one part of the brain with an electrode, He stopped talking. He could see an odd look on the giver's face. They know nothing, the giver said bitterly. Jonas was shocked. Since the first day in the annex room they had together disregarded the rules about rudeness, and Jonas felt comfortable with that now. But this was different, and far beyond rude. This was a terrible accusation. What if someone had heard? He glanced quickly at the wall speaker, terrified that the committee might be listening, as they could at any time. But as always during their sessions, the switch had been turned off. Nothing? Jonas whispered nervously. But my instructors... The giver flicked his hand as if brushing something aside. Oh, your instructors are well trained. They know their scientific facts. Everyone is well trained for his job. It's just that without the memories, it's all meaningless. They gave that burden to me, and to the previous receiver, and the one before him. And back, and back, and back, Jonas said, knowing the phrase that always came. The giver smiled, though his smile was oddly harsh. That's right, and next it will be you. A great honor. Yes, sir, they told me that at the ceremony, the very highest honor. So, understanding that he will continue to feel this separation from himself, developing individuality, his own critical thinking, his own personality, that it will ostracize him more from the people around him, and that will be very uncomfortable for him. Okay. Now, let's get into the reading. So, in the previous chapter, we learned from Zillah the... Oh, hi, Tiny! She just ate. We learned from Zillah, the servant at Wuthering Heights, what is going on, that Catherine isn't getting along with anyone, that people, especially in a lower class than Catherine, the servants, are not understanding why she's behaving the way she is. Like, you have a lot. Why are you so upset all the time? And Catherine also experiencing hardship, but it is the worst that she has personally experienced for the kind of class that she grew up in and the socialization that she got and the coddling that she received. And now she is being abused, and we see that Heathcliff is continuing to perpetuate this abuse that he experienced when he was growing up, and that he has effectively taken control of both of these properties, that he has effectively gotten his revenge, I would say. And then we also have to address, like, at what cost, and how it is more of a colonizer sensibility to think that revenge in and of itself is evil, and that people don't deserve justice. So, this is chapter 17. Yesterday was bright, calm, and frosty. Oh, so this is Mr. Lockwood now, because Nellie is done narrating the story. Yesterday was bright, calm, and frosty. I went to the Heights as I proposed. My housekeeper entreated me to bear a little note from her to her young lady, and I did not refuse, for the worthy woman was not conscious of anything odd in her request. The front door stood open, but the jealous gate was fastened as at my last visit. I knocked and invoked Earnshaw from among the garden beds. He unchained it, and I entered. The fellow is as handsome a rustic as need be seen. I took particular notice of him this time. But then he does his best, apparently, to make the least of his advantages. It's like he also is in a lower class, dude. Anyway. I asked if Mr. Heathcliff were at home. He answered no, but he would be in at dinner time. It was 11 o'clock, and I announced my intention of going in and waiting for him, at which he immediately flung down his tools and accompanied me in the office of watchdog, not as a substitute for the host. We entered together. I mean, that's fair. That's fair of him to be doing, because Lockwood also just, like, broke into the place the last time. So, Catherine was there, making herself useful and preparing some vegetables for the approaching meal. She looked more sulky and less spirited than when I had seen her first. She hardly raised her eyes to notice me, and continued her employment with the same disregard to common forms of politeness as before, never returning my bow and good morning by the slightest acknowledgment. She does not seem so amiable, I thought, as Mrs. Dean would persuade me to believe. She's a beauty, it is true, but not an angel. Earnshaw surlily bid her remove her things to the kitchen. Remove them yourself, she said, pushing them from her, as soon as she had done, and retiring to a stool by the window, where she began to carve figures of birds and beasts out of the turnip parings in her lap. I approached her, pretending to desire a view of the garden, and, as I fancied, adroitly dropped Mrs. Dean's note onto her knee, unnoticed by Hareton, but she asked aloud, "What is that?" and chucked it off. She's just, like, revealing his tactic. A letter from your old acquaintance, the housekeeper at the Grange, I answered, annoyed at her exposing my kind deed, and fearful lest it should be imagined a missive of my own. She would gladly have gathered it up at this information, but Hareton beat her. He seized and put it in his waistcoat, saying Mr. Heathcliff should look at it first. Thereat, Catherine silently turned her face from us, and very stealthily drew out her pocket-handkerchief and applied it to her eyes. And her cousin, after struggling a while to keep down his softer feelings, pulled out the letter and flung it on the floor beside her as ungraciously as he could. So she knows how to get what she wants from Hareton, it seems, now. Catherine caught and perused it eagerly. Then she put a few questions to me concerning the inmates, rational and irrational, of her former home, and gazing towards the hills, murmured in soliloquy, I should like to be riding Minnie down there. I should like to be climbing up there. Oh, I'm tired. I'm stalled, Hareton. And she leant her pretty head back against the sill, with half a yawn and half a sigh, and lapsed into an aspect. I keep referring back to my own voice and forgetting that I have Mr. Lockwood as the narrator. So I have to go back to his voice. Anyway. And lapsed into an aspect of abstracted sadness, neither caring nor knowing whether we remarked her. Mrs. Heathcliff, I said, after sitting some time mute, You are not aware that I am an acquaintance of yours? So intimate that I think it strange you won't come and speak to me. My housekeeper never wearies of talking about and praising you, and she'll be greatly disappointed if I return and no news of or from you, except that you received her letter and said nothing." She appeared to wonder at this speech, and asked, "Does Ellen like you?" "Yes, very well," I replied unhesitatingly. Just like, I don't know about that. "You must tell her," she continued, "that I would answer her letter, but I have no materials for writing, not even a book from which I might tear a leaf." "No books!" I exclaimed. "How do you contrive to live here without them? If I may take the liberty to inquire, though provided with a large library, I'm frequently very dull at the Grange. Take my books away, and I should be desperate." Yeah, like maybe you should have brought her a book. I thought that was kind of implied that she might not have these kinds of things with moving to Wuthering Heights. That Nellie might have thought that. Anyway. "I was always reading when I had them," said Catherine, "and Mr. Heathcliff never reads, so he took it into his head to destroy my books." Oh, that's a crime. That's a crime. "I have not had a glimpse of one for weeks. Only once I searched through Joseph's store of theology to his great irritation, and once Hareton, I came upon a secret stock in your room, some Latin and Greek, and some tales and poetry. All old friends. I brought the last here, and you gathered them, as a magpie gathers silver spoons for the mere love of stealing." Oh, so she's accusing him of stealing. "They are of no use to you, or else you concealed them in the bad spirit, that as you cannot enjoy them, nobody else shall. Perhaps your envy counselled Mr. Heathcliff to rob me of my treasures. But I've most of them written on my brain, and printed in my heart, and you cannot deprive me of those." Earnshaw blushed crimson when his cousin made this revelation of his private literary accumulations, and stammered in indignant denial of her accusations. "Mr. Hareton is desirous of increasing his amount of knowledge," I said, coming to his rescue. "He is not envious, but emulous of your attainments." To emulate. "He'll be a clever scholar in a few years." Juniper's back on the windowsill. Hi. "And he wants me to sink into a dunce meantime," answered Catherine. "Yes, I hear him trying to spell and read to himself, and pretty blunders he makes. I wish you would repeat Chevy Chase as you did yesterday. It is extremely funny. I heard you, and I heard you turning over the dictionary to seek out the hard words and then cursing because you couldn't read their explanations." The young man evidently thought it too bad that he should be laughed at for his ignorance, and then laughed at for trying to remove it. I had a similar notion, and remembering Mrs. Dean's anecdote of his first attempt at enlightening the darkness in which he had been reared, I observed, "But, Mrs. Heathcliff, we have each had a commencement, and each stumbled and tottered on the threshold, and had our teachers scorned instead of aiding us, we should stumble and totter yet." Let's see how long this chapter is. "Oh," she replied, "I don't wish to limit his acquirements. Still, he has no right to appropriate what is mine, and make it ridiculous to me with his vile mistakes and mispronunciations. Those books, both prose and verse, were consecrated to me by other associations, and I hate to have them debased and profaned in his mouth. Besides of all, he has selected my favorite pieces that I love the most to repeat, as if out of deliberate malice." Hareton's chest heaved in silence a minute. He labored under a severe sense of mortification and wrath, which it was no easy task to suppress. I rose, and from a gentlemanly idea of relieving his embarrassment, took up my station in the doorway, surveying the external prospect as I stood. He followed my example and left the room, but presently reappeared, bearing half a dozen volumes in his hands, which he threw into Catherine's lap, exclaiming, "Take them. I never wanted to hear, or read, or think of them again." "You won't have them now," she answered. "I shall connect them with you, and hate them." She opened one that had previously and obviously been offered... Wait, I'm mixing up my words. Sorry about that. Oh, you scared me, Bug. She opened one that had obviously been often turned over and read a portion in the drawling tone of a beginner, then laughed and threw it from her. So she's become cruel and essentially a younger version of her mother. It was kind of this end goal, perhaps, that Heathcliff was having her become more like Kathy. Something to consider. And it's also concerning, obviously. And listen, she continued provokingly, commencing a verse of an old ballad in the same fashion. But his self-love would endure no further torment. I heard, and not altogether disapprovingly, a manual check given to her saucy tongue. The little wretch had done her utmost to hurt her cousin's sensitive, though uncultivated feelings, and a physical argument was the only mode he had of balancing the account and repaying its effects on the inflictor. He afterwards gathered the books and hurled them on the fire. I read in his countenance what anguish it was to offer that sacrifice to spleen. Sad. He just wants to learn to read. I fancied that as they consumed, he recalled the pleasure they had already imparted, and the triumph, an ever-increasing pleasure he had anticipated from them. And I fancied, I guessed, the incitement to his secret studies also. He had been content with daily labor and rough animal enjoyments, till Catherine crossed his path. Shame at her scorn. So, yeah, now that he knows the backstory, he's able to actually, see the situation and understand what these interactions mean. And he seems to be perceiving it in more, at least in a way that's a little more similar to how Nellie told the story, their history together. Shame at her scorn and hope of her approval were his first prompters to higher pursuits, and instead of guarding him from one and winning him the other, his endeavors to raise himself had produced just the contrary result. Yes, that's all the good that such a brute as you can get from them, cried Catherine, sucking her damaged lip and watching the conflagration with indignant eyes. You'd better hold your tongue now, he answered fiercely. And his agitation precluding further speech, he advanced hastily to the entrance where I made way for him to pass. But ere he had crossed the door-stones, Mr. Heathcliff, coming up the causeway, encountered him and laying hold of his shoulder, asked, What's to do now, my lad? Not, he said, and broke away, to enjoy his grief and anger and solitude. Heathcliff gazed after him and sighed. It will be odd if I thwart myself, he muttered, unconscious that I was behind him. But when I look for his father in his face, I find her every day more. How the devil is he so like? I can hardly bear to see him. Meaning, he sees her every day. So Harriton's dad is Hindley and the wife. He's not talking about the wife, I'm guessing. Is he talking about the similarities to Catherine, perhaps? How the devil is he so like? Yeah, probably. I can hardly bear to see him. He bent his eyes to the ground and walked moodily in. There was a restless, anxious expression in his countenance. I had never remarked there before, and he looked sparer in person. His daughter-in-law, on perceiving him through the window, immediately escaped into the kitchen, so that I remained alone. I'm glad to see you out of doors again, Mr. Lockwood, he said in reply to my greeting. From selfish motives, partly. I don't think I could readily supply your loss in this desolation. I've wondered, more than once, what brought you here. An idle whim, I fear, sir, was my answer. Or else an idle whim is going to spirit me away. I shall set out for London next week, and I must give you warning that I feel no disposition to retain Thrushcross Grange beyond the 12 months I agreed to rent it. I believe I shall not live there any more. Oh, indeed. You're tired of being banished from the world, are you? He said. But if you are coming to plead off pain for a place you won't occupy, your journey is useless. I never relent in exacting my due from anyone. I'm coming to plead off nothing about it, I exclaimed, considerably irritated, because he's of an upper class, and he's like, money is not an issue, you offend me. Should you wish it, I'll settle with you now, and I withdrew my notebook from my pocket. No, he replied coolly. You'll leave sufficient behind to cover your debts, if you fail to return. I'm not in such a hurry. Sit down and take your dinner with us. A guest that is safe from repeating his visit can generally be made welcome. Catherine, bring the things in. Where are you? Catherine reappeared, bearing a tray of knives and forks. You may get your dinner with Joseph, muttered Heathcliff aside, and remain in the kitchen till he is gone. She obeyed his directions very punctually. Perhaps she had no temptation to transgress. Living among clowns and misanthropists, she probably cannot appreciate a better class of people when she meets them. See, classist. Mr. Heathcliff grim and saturnine on one hand, and Hareton absolutely dumb on the other. I made a somewhat cheerless meal, and bid adieu early. I would have departed by the back way to get a last glimpse of Catherine and annoy old Joseph. But Hareton received orders to lead up my horse, and my host himself escorted me to the door, so I could not fulfill my wish. How dreary life gets over in that house, I reflected, while riding down the road. What a realization of something more romantic than a fairy tale it would have been for Mrs. Linton Heathcliff, had she and I struck up an attachment, as her good nurse desired, and migrated together into the stirring atmosphere of the town. Okay. That is the end of chapter 17. All right. That's going to be it for me. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow I'm going to finish the courses for HIV awareness, for healthcare workers on the specific needs of BIPOC-queer patients and people that they're serving. Yeah. Sorry, I scared you. Whoops. Anyway, thanks for being here. It was good chatting with you. I have a good... Wow. It's a good thing I'm ending. I'm just stumbling over all my words. Joy. Okay. Have a good rest of your evening, your day, wherever you are. And I will see you soon. Okay, bye.